people who actually cycle every day to work and have a nice bike probably have their bike stolen and realize that this is not only financially an issue, but it's also painful because you need it for commuting. You might have a family, you have to bring your kids to school with a bike, and if it's stolen, you might have to wait some time until the insurance pays. And that's another number which is rather interesting. Also was new for myself. This is actually by now more than 50% of all sold bikes in Germany, but in Europe the numbers are quite similar by now of e-bikes. That means so the electrification of the bicycle market is very strong and is growing. That means in the future, and for e-bikes we have not only other, basically we need only other requirements, but also e-bikes in general are more expensive. An average bicycle costs 800 euros per bike, more or less a nice bike. Easily 4,000 or 5,000 euros. It's even more problem than a normal bike, and it's even more an incentive maybe for thieves to steal an e-bike. But nevertheless, the market is growing, and what is quite interesting is also that actually people who use an e-bike, they use it more for commuting larger distances. That means that with an e-bike I can easily cycle 10, 15 kilometers to work, and I don't have to sweat so much. It's easier, it's more comfortable. Also more on the kind of people are not so strong, older people, etc., who's more comfortable to use e-bikes. E-bikes used to also be a bit more, not really flashy, more geriatric. Old people used to cycle e-bikes, but by now we can see an enormous shift. This is, for example, dance from Berlin. It's super cool. Everyone wants to cycle, to use it. The young generation are using it. They're cool bikes. And then again, the e-scooters, you know them also here from Vilnius. But this is a typical situation you see in many cities. If you're cycling, doesn't have to be e-bike, a normal bike as well. If you arrive somewhere, you have to look for a lamppost, you have to look for a fence or a tree, and if you're unlucky, you arrive at night, you might have to compete with the remains of a dog. And so there's never enough space for bicycles. And therefore, we think there's a need for secure parking and charging, because these e-bikes also need to be charged, which is very important. And maybe people carry the bike into their flat. If you live on the third floor, the e-bike is quite heavy, maybe 15, 20 kilos. It's not so easy to carry up. That means also some of the bikes you can take the battery out, here for example, but that means also very often you have the batteries then lined up, for example, in the office, in the hallway. There's definitely an issue of that batteries can catch fire, and maybe not so often. So that means it's actually not so ideal to keep them in the office or in your private house, and most people don't have a nice garage to keep the bikes. So that's only around the space, but also we need to have secure parking. And the second topic is that in general the cities, Copenhagen, Amsterdam, Paris is a very good example. They're in the full transformation of the urban environment towards a new mobility, and we have to adapt for these mobility needs in the city. And you can see here, for example, on the left side is a counting station in the center of Berlin. At the end of the day, it's 3,000 bikes, and this is actually a low number. Usually that's about 4,000 or 5,000 bikes per day passing this station. I think it's an enormous number, and there is a huge need for infrastructure, for facilities, but most cities actually don't provide these infrastructures. Yeah, and most or many cities are actually not adapting to mobility needs. I still can remember in Vilnius, but this is really in other cities as well, there's a cycle lane coming towards a lamppost, and then they're painting the cycle lane around the lamppost, and then it stops. But you see that in other cities as well. I've been recently also, for example, in Athens, beautiful city, but I would call Athens the anti-city, because if you're there, you don't even have to be there in summer, 45 degrees, no trees, no pavements, or the pavement is half a meter, and only cars, I will come to that,
And we are actually in cities coming towards, I would say, a tipping point with increased vulnerability of cities. This is a typical picture of flooding in Berlin. These situations will happen more often in cities. That means cities are vulnerable. And also, I just talked about, this is a picture of Athens. There's absolutely zero greenery. I mean, here there's a bit of a tree coming out, but that's really not the issue. But here we will have around 45, 50 degrees. That means it's almost not inhabitable to live in these cities. Therefore, I would call it the anti-city. The city has very poor infrastructure in terms of public transportation. Since the Olympics, it became much better. But this is only one example. We recently also went to Bucharest, similar issues. Basically, everyone wants to have a car, and this is not about being anti-car. But I have the feeling very often our car usage in cities is a bit kind of a drunken or an addict. You know, you want to have always more and bigger. So it's about kind of, we have to become onto a diet of, I would say, the car. And therefore, I would like to talk about the areas of potential in the cities. And what we want to achieve in the end are livable cities. And in order to achieve that, we need to have a fair distribution of land. And there it becomes actually quite interesting. Here is a comparison of space distribution between, on the left side, you can see the car when it is actually moving, because you have to calculate that a car, if it's driving, needs to also brake and needs space to brake. And therefore, a car in movement, 50 kilometers, needs around 140 square meters. A car parked needs around 20 square meters. Public transport with 50 passengers, 7 square meters. Cycling when it's moving, 5, 2 when it's parked, and pedestrians. And I think it's an enormous, I would say, unfair distribution of space within the city. And here it's another graph quite similar. You can see that this is in no way somehow in balance. And the reason I'm highlighting to that is not only about that people are moving with cars, but it's also about the parked cars. Usually people using their cars only for maybe 10, 15, 20 minutes per day. They're using it alone. The majority, I would say 95% of the time, a car is only parked. It's actually immobile. And if we want to go toward the 15-minute city, that means a city of short distances, that we have streets for people rather than for cars, we need to rethink what parking spaces actually can be. And this is a very interesting, they call it the curbside strategy from London. Lambeth Council has developed this curbside strategy looking into, they call it the curbside, is actually the parking area of streets. And they have developed the healthy street approach, looking into developing a new approach to the spatial distribution. That means it's not against cars, it's not anti-car, but it's basically less cars. And they actually achieve that by providing more public transport facilities, shared car facilities, and also reduce the dominance from the motor vehicle. Then they reduce in the same time also the danger of fewer casualties. The people want to go more on the street. And if you feel safer on the street, you also start cycling and using other modes of transport. And basically by this modal shift, you close the loop and you reduce actually the amount of individual car transportation. They have developed a scheme, for example, the priority one is the enabling accessibility and active travel. That means people should be able to use, also if they are not mobile, to use the public space, also to create place for people, also to increase the resilience to climate change, talking about the heat island effect, the water retention, the water runoff, because we have both. We have the heat and we have the water. And then also, in general, reduce traffic and emissions from transport. That means the car is a great invention. I have to use it myself, but I think we have to think about how we're going to use it less. And then comes really the increased resilience to climate change. We have to think about how we can green and make greener the open space, and sometimes we have maybe a metro underground, we have infrastructure, so we have to think about different planting regimes, about facades, and here's also about creating spaces for people. On the left corner is a great example of Berlin. This used to be a streetscape where everyone was driving through, motorbikes, cars, was full of cars, and they have changed the scheme. They have removed all the cars and then have also taken the existing tarmac off and made it greener and made it space for people. These are also a typical street when it's closed to make parties for kids. Also here in Athens, very beautiful, you know, a space for people. Everyone meets in the evening, and it's a space for people rather than for cars. And in the same time, we need to be mobile, but we have to promote healthy mobility. That means the topic of last mile, you know, like delivery doesn't have to be a big car. This, for example, my cargo bike, you know, you can really move heavy equipment from A to B without using a car. But then coming towards also, again, to the cycling, or here we need to really carry out pilot projects to test how we can change space. This is a nice example. This is in Milan, before and after, transforming the space for people. This is also Milan. This used to be a very active junction in Milan, and to transform it into people spaces. And therefore, talking about possible solutions, I found this is a very interesting study. Recently came out in Germany, has been done by the Fraunhofer Institute, which is a very famous research institution, and it was basically initiated by the ADFC, which is the Association for Cyclists in Germany. And what is quite interesting, because we have in Germany, like in other countries as well, currently a huge, I would say, almost a fight within the society between, let's say, you go green, you go alternative, you go you don't use car, you use cycling, and then actually you go almost backwards. Everywhere you want to drive everywhere with your car, and so there is a huge conflict. And also, if you talk about the spatial distribution, the conflict really breaks up, becomes quite aggressive, I would say. And what I like about this study, that this has been done by a very independent scientific research institute, and it was a very comprehensive study. And what they found out is that currently in Germany you have 30% cycling is part of the entire mobility mix in the country. And they found out that this 13% can be increased, that means cycling can be increased to 45% if you basically do these 3 steps. You do a friendly infrastructure for cyclists and pedestrians. You do the modal shift. That means you have, for example, and this is also a change in the legislation in Germany, which is very interesting, that companies, they become now a mobility budget. That means I can give to my employees a budget of number X, 100 euros per month, whatever, 50 euros, and you can use that 50 or 100 euros, whatever you want. You can use it for petrol in your car. You can basically cycle to work. You can get a job rat, basically financed by the company. You can use a monthly ticket for your public transport. So it's up to you how you want to use it. Gives you flexibility, and interestingly, you can deduct it from the tax. So by doing that, they're supporting actually alternative transport. This is basically the second step. So you can cycle, you can go, for example, to cycle to the train station, use a train, and so on. And the third one is actually that the administration, the government needs to have a cycling-friendly policy and politics, that people have the feeling they're understood. So they're saying if you do these 3 steps together, you can increase in a country like Germany cycling from 13 up to 45%, which is enormous. Yeah, and I personally have lived in Rotterdam for 4 years. I mean, it's enormous. I mean, Netherlands has been there also, let's say, 30 years ago and 40 years ago. There was a very hard, and you always think, Netherlands, everyone is cycling, it's so great. But they have been going through that process, very hard process also for decades to arrive where they have been now. And it's not an easy path, but you need to start and to do these steps in order not to become an anti-city, yeah, which is not livable in the future. And even now on the European level, we have the European Declaration on Cycling, relatively new, to integrate all the different approaches throughout the European Union and to foster and strengthen cycling in the European Union. And number 3, chapter 3, is creating more and better cycling infrastructure. You're not cycling if you don't have the infrastructure. That means better roads, cycle roads, separated from the car traffic, better bikes and so on, better charging. And that's where, to close the circle now, we come in, where we developed products we are bringing to the market now. We create what we call your personal parking area. To join the new area of electric parking. That means it's not a parking only, it's also a charging station. And there we have basically developed a station where you can park and charge for your personal mobility needs. And that's our vision. One parking station is exactly half of the size of a parking space. That means if you take one car out, you can put 2 parking stations in. They're accessible from the pavement. You can open them with an app. They're electrified. Here are the sockets. Unfortunately, in the bike sector, it's the same like with mobile phones. Everyone has an own charger. That means nothing is compatible, and therefore the smallest kind of, I would say, technology where everything fits is a normal 230 volt socket, which is ridiculous because this is actually not what a bicycle needs, but this is actually where everyone meets. This is a standard, and so that's where we are right now. This is one station for 4 bikes. If you take one car out, 8 bikes in. It is actually protected for the weather, rain, but also for stealing and also for vandalism. And also you have a space. And I personally would actually book a place like this. Unfortunately, I live in Berlin. This is not allowed because this is public space, and I'm not allowed to put this in public space. Yeah, and this is where actually the cat chases a tail. And even though we have now built the 3rd prototype, it's there, and actually I needed to rent a parking space in order to put my prototype somewhere rather than using it where it is actually needed. Yeah, quite interesting in terms of policies in a city. We have developed actually an entire product family, from a closed station to an open low threshold station where it's just covered by the rain for bicycles, but at the same time also for scooters. All of these are electrified. That means the scooters could be or can be charged here, like the bikes. And then we have also a very low threshold docking station, which right now, for example, here in Vilnius, you can see now that if you use a scooter, you have to park in dedicated areas. But nevertheless, most of the time the scooters, they're all falling and over, and after a while in the evening you have spaghetti. That means if you would provide this docking station, you can park your scooters, 8, 4 on each side. They're actually not falling over, and so it's also quite important about the acceptance of the new mobility, that these are regulated. You know, here, for example, Vilnius is very nice. If you drive through a certain area with a scooter, we actually came to this lecture with a scooter. You have to, automatically of geofencing, the speed is reduced. I think the geofencing is a very precise mechanism to control and regulate how actually the parking is functioned. And I think if you have an infrastructure where you actually can dock it and it's not falling over and it's not a spaghetti, I think it's very useful. Once more, this is actually to open and to close. We have developed the prototype with a solar panel on the back, off-grid, with battery, with a transformer, etc. And it works off-grid, but the technology which goes in there is, I would say, rather expensive, And then if you think about putting a product on the market which is too expensive, which no one buys, also doesn't work. So we are not progressing further with the off-grid version, only with the grid version. But that's now going too much in detail. Again, that's for bicycles, that's for scooters. And what's also quite interesting, the plug-and-play concept, that we don't need foundations. That means you can just place the station wherever you need, in your courtyard, in your private, in front of your company, and the open space. And if you have a problem that you need to renovate something, you have to go, and or you have the feeling the location is not right, you just move it. And you're not bound to foundations. Also about the city space, here how you can arrange it in the different parking arrangements throughout the city, whether the open or the closed. Quite interesting also, in many cities they're opening now all the corners. That means now they start to take these cars away from corner, that if a car comes from here and there are kids coming from school, walking home, they're not blocked by the car. So this is actually a very nice opportunity to place these in front of the buildings. This is, for example, the retrofitting in private space. We are also in contact with housing associations, for instance, with I don't know how many thousand units. Very often, this is the best example, they don't even have bicycle parking in their buildings. And if they have a bicycle parking, it's in the basement. You have to carry it down the stairs because they don't have lifts, or you have to carry it up. And very interesting, it's also bizarre. You see that quite often in Germany. This is actually the rubbish. It's actually protected and it's even locked. Yeah. So, but the bikes, they're in the rain, and they're not protected and they're not locked. So actually it would be an actually relatively easy means of activating, retrofitting existing building stocks. Here you can see once more opening, closing. Here's a solar panel. This is also how it fits into the existing city fabric. This is in Hamburg when we went to a fair in front of a residential building. Also there's a light. That means in particular in the winter time where it becomes already dark at 5, 6, 7 o'clock. That means you arrive there and you don't have to go around in the dark and find your spot. You open it, the light goes on. It's very convenient. This is the latest prototype, which was finished actually last week. It's actually not a prototype anymore. This has been sold to a hotel in Belgrade. We will deliver it when I'm back in Berlin. And here just also for the students, because I'm also running a workshop, as you have heard right now. As I cannot see any of my students here, I think they're still probably in the park working. And so, yeah, talking about implementation of something, you know, not only producing paper tigers, drawing. I think it's very beautiful for us architects to draw, but then if you go to reality, you go to implementation. Even for me as an experienced architect, this is a hell of a journey we are going through. And even developing the prototypes, even because here there are movable parts, there are electrical components involved to make it more efficient. You have to think about the cost, you have to think about the sourcing, you have to think about the production. Right now we are moving very likely the production from Poland to Romania because of the cost. And the issue is also how much money would people actually pay for an infrastructure like that? Is it 4, 5, 6, 7, 8,000 euros? And so because you spend a lot of money for a car, but not for a bicycle, and not even for actually protecting the valuable infrastructure as a bicycle. So this is about the prototyping, the production. Do you zinc it, do you powder coat it, and so on and so forth. So it's very interesting to think about it. Even if you go to fairs, how do you bring this beast of 400 kilos to a fair? We put wheels underneath, we have been driving thousands of kilometers to the fairs to unload it, to present it, so people can touch it. So it's actually quite of an endeavor. That's basically about the Domum. I would like to quickly show you one project which is more or less in the same family of thoughts. Before then I hand over to my colleague. And this is about mobility hubs. So thinking about bigger than only what I've been showing you right now. We have been doing that in collaboration with the University of Kassel. They have been doing a quite extensive research project about mobility in the countryside, because very often we focus in mobility about cities. When we talk about urban mobility, it's usually about cities. But actually people who live on the countryside also need to be mobile. And usually in the countryside means if you want to be mobile, use a car, of course. But if you follow actually the numbers, it becomes very interesting that the majority of the transportation of the movement in the countryside is actually smaller than 5 kilometers. That means, and my mom lives in a village, for instance, the people just drive around the village. So actually in the village you can also use your bicycle. But nowadays, I mean, when I was young, everyone was using a bicycle in the village, but you're not doing that anymore. You even go to the bakery if you live in a village in the countryside with your car. You go shopping with a car. So the car became the norm of everything you do. So I think thinking about mobility in the countryside is equally important. So the University of Kassel has done an extensive research about this topic and has asked 4 architects to develop in these, I think were 6 locations, mobility hubs for their research. And what's interesting, they wanted to have, and that was a requirement, they want to have a social function, a secondary social function within the mobility hub. Because they're saying we maybe know that when we were younger, if you drive to the countryside, where do the young people hang out? That was a time before the mobile phone, probably on the bus stop. Yeah, so the bus stop used to be a bit the hangout point, the social meeting point, and nowadays no one is using that anymore. But if you think we go back to that, the mobility hub can actually be a hub where you have car sharing, where you have a station where you can receive your packages, for example, your delivery from Amazon, wherever. You can actually rent a bike, you can basically charge your bikes and so on. You maybe can move to the next city. There are concepts like the kind of transportation bank where you can share basically transportation. And this was in one village where this building was actually abandoned, and they wanted to develop this large mobility hub where the bus stops, where there are supermarkets next by, so it's almost a bit like a honeypot. And we thought that actually a youth club was missing in the area, and we developed also a youth club there, and in a playful way also have an outdoor gym next to a mobility hub. Here, for example, a parkit station. You can sit, you can wait for the bus, and you can strengthen your muscle. This one was just in the historic center of a small village. We thought that actually it can be in the same time a marketplace for the neighborhood, a meeting spot. For example, here you can do a little farmer's market, or you sell your products. You can do a little flea market. You can do in the evening maybe show movies and have a kind of gathering of the family of the community. So it actually can be a mobility station with a community space in the same time. Why not? This was another village where the station was very close to a park. So we extended the station into a park and had also an outdoor kitchen, because very often if you have kids, you have a kid's birthday, what do you want to do? I mean, maybe you do a bit of barbecue, you cook, and you spill out the program into the open space, and to use it as an outdoor kitchen at the same time as a mobility hub. That's also an image of that with an outdoor kitchen. And the last one, I think here, the street vending. It was a very small village, just almost along one street. But what was typical for that village, there was a big farm with organic produce. People go there and buy the products. So why not extending it to the street? For people who actually know the Balkans and Eastern Europe, people actually always sell their products on the street. You know, driving through Eastern Europe, it's actually normal. You know, so why not having that as a stable function, also as part of a mobility station, that you have a small vending spot where you can buy your honey, your other fruits, whatever you want. So this is also another image. And this was the Maxi, the big one, when you maybe come to a next sub-center, maybe with 50,000 people, where there's a mobility hub And that's actually something they have implemented already in East Germany very successfully when they introduced also a health kiosk, because in the countryside we have a big problem with the shortage of doctors and the availability of health services. That means if you have a health kiosk where maybe a doctor comes every Tuesday and every Thursday for the afternoon in that health kiosk, he has small facilities there, and can also, you could place that also in a mobility hub. They have been doing something similar in Eastern Europe, and it's in East Germany is very successful, where a doctor can actually then not only provide service in one village, maybe in 5 villages simultaneously. So that's what we call the Maxi Hub, and that's basically so far. I would like to then hand over to the 700 slides.
Thanks a lot, Slavis, for this very interesting presentation. So I'm going to present now Francisco Fonseca, who is from Collective Pedrez. He's going to talk as well about his studio's projects. So Pedrez was founded in 2020 in Porto, Portugal, by Matilde Cabral and Francisco Fonseca. From the merger Fashion Development Studio Fashion Office and the Experimental Architecture Workshop SCRY. Sorry if I'm not pronouncing that well. With works presented in institutions such as Calouste Gulbenkian Foundation, Columbia University, Royal College of Arts, International Architecture Exhibition of La Biennale di Venezia in 2018 and 2023. And Istanbul Design Triennale. Pedrez emerges as a workshop for applied research in the areas of systematic ecology and housing subsistence, with ongoing projects such as capsulas, designation for nomadic peri-urban off-grid units, Studere Sativa, a multidisciplinary studio for the study and development of constructions using cultivatable materials, and Air, Water, Land Unit, applied research on water self-sufficiency and territorial geoengineering. Welcome, and please, Francisco.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. It's my first time. I'm very impressed with this city and the people. I really love it. I wish you invite me a lot more times. Well, I will give you a little bit of context to my work. It's not only my work; it's the work of these 4 people. It's Matilde, that's me, and this craftsman people who I work with for a long time. This is I was living in the Netherlands for a few years, and then when I moved to Portugal, I thought I would never get a commission for architecture. So well, we got some people asking to make some art things, and well, this was our first exhibition where we basically made a power plant where people were invited to use this toilet. And from this toilet we would get the gas to heat the water and feed a cooker for people to cook. This was our very first action we had in Portugal. And then we had another project, was really interesting. I love to bring it, I found this picture lately. I was working with earth building, so I thought, well, I'll never get commissions for as an architect, so I'll start building with earth. And my first idea was to make baby crimps out of earth, and we went testing these crimps with babies, and we found out that that's something quite incredible. When a baby is in this kind of a egg, it's a big egg crimp. They would calm down, and we saw this happening so many times. It's something that you can't quite explain. Well, we had a lot of time, so free, so I went out with a friend of mine, my ex-partner, a business partner, Pedro, and we went collecting earth samples all throughout the country. I wanted to know what the resources we had in Portugal for earth building. So we built a large collection of samples. We would place the earth in bottles, in water bottles, so we could see how, you know, the basic buildup of the soil. We would also, you know, this was extensively done for years. We've been doing this kind of small samples where we would plaster with a crude earth and then try to get a sense of what we were handling. Whether the material cracked or whether it let some dust off. So, well, we got a first commission to make a earth flooring. That was quite an interesting thing, because we had to start really testing things for real. Many tests. Well, these photos were taken when the tests were already completely, you know, demolished. Of course, many testing went wrong, but. And then we ended up like making this first building where the walls were all made out of earth. We used lime plasters sometimes in bathroom, but and the earth flooring as a interpretation of the ancient traditional rammed earth floor. We came up to this kind of grid shape flooring, because we basically didn't know how they did it all times. There aren't many descriptions on how earth floorings were made. So for a few years, I wouldn't know how to make an earth floor without this grid. So we cheated a bit and we made this grid so we could contain the earth as we were ramming. Well, later we learned that there were lots of people just hanging, with, you know, stepping the earth at the same time, so they could flatten the floor and ram it without running into the problem of ramming here and getting it like off there, and then you go there and ram it, and then it's going high here. So that was the problem we had, and when people work together, ramming the floor, this wasn't a problem. Well, we went from, you know, this kind of trials on finishing materials and floorings into something more substantial. We had a commission for this farmhouse to rebuild it, and we used only the resources they had there. Like, we quarried the stone in the site, and we quarried the clay also in the site. This is a project that was quite interesting in the sense that we could see how much you have available when you actually make an effort to know your resources. Usually it's enough or close to enough for the gross building construction. This is an interior picture of this farmhouse, where this is all made with local materials, and the stone and the clay was sourced on site. Well, at a certain point we have this was later on, we had a project, I want to bring it in. This is a model of a site, like pretty large site. This is the sun arch, which we adjusted also for the moon path. This is the model where we mapped the geological resources into the model, because it was commissioned for a hotel, which was not actually built, because we told our clients we thought it was a good idea not to build it. So it was a very nice project. We, just to show you that this earth research was, it was sort of expanding in applications and tools. This is a typical model we build. These are not models; these are actually small buildings. So we manufacture the bricks and and the roof tiles. And the reason for this is not just romantic thing of making models like puppet houses, but it's basically it's in my company we design and build. And so the building director, so the technical the person that is responsible on site for pursuing the building jobs, he really needs to know the logistics of how to build. And I usually had young people with me, so even for small buildings or large buildings, you know, the technical director, which was an architect, is usually an architect. We made large-scale models, so he would get a sense of the logistics. Building for me is mostly a question of logistics. It's not so much how to fix stuff together, because that's been reviewed and that's been solved in the project. It's mostly about how things come into place in an orderly manner. So these kind of models were very helpful. And this is an example. When we went on researching with earth building, we went, of course, into compressed earth blocks. Then a museum asked us to make to bring something to their museum, and we thought we would bring an arch, a catenary arch made out of compressed earth blocks. This is when you pour the earth into a hydraulic press or manual press, but we do it with hydraulic press. You get a very sturdy, very fine material that for reasons we're not bringing into this presentation. It's not taking the markets, though it's a very available material, cheap material, it's like easy to build with. So we proposed to make a catenary arch. So this is a prototype. We were testing the strength of the arch in a very basic way, just loading the arch with bricks and checking how it collapsed. This was, you know, demolishing things is the best way to learn how to build, because you see, you know, in a glimpse like of 2-3 days, for instance, in a building demolition, you see everything. So I love demolitions, and well, this was the final constructions. You can still see here I don't know how to call this piece. It's something that you take out once the arch is in place. It's kind of a cofragem formwork. Of course, we got some support from laboratories, but which help us to take this compressed earth building, which was completely absent in the north of Portugal. The earth in the north of Portugal is very hard to compact, because we have a lot of granite sediment, and that's really hard to compact. So we took this as a challenge, and so following the arch experiment, then we went, you know, setting our own production of blocks to make a house. There were plenty of learnings in this process. Also, for the first time, we went into sheep wool, which is an amazing material, and just for bureaucratic reasons or bad legislation, it doesn't get into the market very expressively. It's really a shame. Well, and this kind of aroused my curiosity on proteins, on natural proteins. So we got very fast into beeswax. We had to set our own hives, because we wanted to harvest a particular kind of beeswax, which was propolis, and that's very expensive. It's taken by the pharmaceutical industry on a gram basis. They pay a lot of money. So it's been used by builders for ages, and so we wanted to have access to it. We started our own hives, and we made other more original hives. This kind of a sarcophagus hive beehive was kind of a proposal for a museum. It was rejected. Yeah, and well, and then we started to use the different kinds of waxes and oils and resins, and to bring it into the architecture, walls, ceilings, bricks, finishing materials mostly. This is stained glass with beeswax, and it all came together in this one building. It was a building. It's a building in downtown. It's a historic area in Porto, and it's a popular house. It's a house for citizens. It's not aristocratic, or it's not a church. You know, it's just a simple house. I wanted to take the spirit of this kind of austerity of the way the population used to build, and we bought 14 tons of earth, and we rebuilt the whole house with earth only, just by basically mixing it with oils and resins and waxes. We could make the earth very, very hard or very soft, and we also played around with salts. Everybody possibly knows that when you add salt into a plaster, the salt will migrate into the surface, and this is seen as a kind of a pathology, as something that is bad. But we were sampling this as a ornamental texture, and we realized that, you know, as you apply salt in different quantities, you get different patterns showing up. If you do it like less, you get, of course, just kind of a few moments. But as you increase the amounts, then it starts to get really interesting. That was kind of also a learning point in this process. And the third point was that we set up. We decided to compact our own tiles for flooring, because I was looking for a solution for flooring. I don't want to, you know, just go and pour a micro cement, or whatever, you know, a resin into the floor. So we started the production of earth floor tiles, which are those. Well, this was meant to see the floor, but it's hard to see anything. But that went really well, and it passed the test of time. It's still there. It's been like 7 years over, and so it gave us a lot of clues for other explorations. I'll show you soon. Well, of course, using wood into the construction is always an issue. We all want to use wood, but the problem is where to source it. So what we did is a scheme where we tag our trees, like trees from private owners, and it's like we book them for future use. So we pay them in advance, so the trees are ours, and we know when we need a specific wood. We have our own trees, so we harvest them, and we use that wood for building. So treating the old wood and new wood with care is, I think, something very, for me, very moving, and it makes architecture way more interesting than just using wood as a generic material. This is what this guy is doing. He's keeping the old walls, and then as you go into the wood universe, you end up, you know, inevitably you get into reeds, into plants that are very used to that are very comfortable with water. So using reed as a substitute, as a replacement of gypsum walls. That's what we started to work, and also to test how, you know, the bending capacity of different kinds of reeds, so we could make different surfaces and well, of course, and then you get into straw bale building, which is something that it doesn't. I have to tell you, it doesn't feel right somehow, because buildings have regulations, and if you don't comply with regulations, you're just too much, you know, marginalized. So we have to look for materials that really comply with major regulations, including fire and seismic regulations. So building with straw and building with earth is always difficult. Earth has a problem with thermal questions. Straw has a problem with seismic constraints, and so I was looking for a material that could respond to this equation, and well, we set to some hemp fields. So this is a hemp plantation in Portugal, and we harvested this during holidays. You know, it's my car. See all the luggage. So we filled the car with hemp stalks, and that after some time gave place to a building made out of hempcrete in Portugal. It was, I think, a pioneering building. We made the recipes we developed for this building all public. This is one part of the building. This is a model where we tried different things. Like, one of the most interesting things I found in this process was that with hempcrete you can use textiles as a formwork, which is quite amazing, and it's saving huge costs in the construction process. If you can use a textile as a formwork as opposed to just wood or pre-made formworks. So we had to make this building in hempcrete. We had to make our machine to press our hemp blocks. It was not easy to make this machine, but we finally made it. We made our production of hemp blocks. This was 2019, I think, something like that, or 18. Yeah. We had to make large prototypes. So that the other technicians, they would feel, so that we could price the building properly. So when people build with something they've never built before, they have to get direct contact with materials, and they have to try it themselves. Like, for instance, the plumber, he has to go there and place his pipes and all, so that he can price his job properly. So making one-to-one models is a must in this kind of architecture. And we finally, got the building. Oh, you see there? This is Utah. So this is the textile that worked as a formwork for the hempcrete. So at a certain point, we had the building skeleton wrapped on textile, completely wrapped, like a Christus sculpture, something like that. And we had to develop to research the plasters. And here you can see the compressed earth tiles for flooring. These are plasters, flooring, like ceilings. Well, happily, at a certain point, there were some people who thought it was a good material to escalate in the markets, so they industrialized it. We're very happy with this development, so we really feel we played a role in this escalation of hempcrete as a building material in Portugal. And there was like another step, which I want to tell you this story, and I think it's going to be the last contribution to this presentation. At a certain point, I thought, if we make a wall that has a different, just going back again. Now, hempcrete is the only building material that one material complies with all regulations. So with one single material, you comply with fire regulation, acoustics, and thermal regulation, which is quite something. I mean, you haven't seen this since regulations came up into the building regulations happened. So this is quite something. And then the thought, so hempcrete is doing this. But if you want to go one step forward, then you think, well, if this one building material, I can give it certain properties in the outer layer, in the middle layer, and the inner layer. So if you break it into 3 recipes, then you have a building material that is even more responsive. And so we started to work the inside layer. We wanted to make hempcrete walls composed of 3 layers. So the inside layer, we started to add oils, like vegetable oils, into the hemp sheaves to get more compaction and to make the walls with a kind of nice finishing for the inside. And this we got with these blocks, so this double layer block. And we were afraid they would detach, that this wouldn't work, but it worked really fine. And so we made, you see, these are double layer blocks. We made a building with those blocks. But there was a point that an art curator came to our office and he said, well, we want to, could you, we were searching then for the, so we found this layer, this is very good for inside. This was working as a middle layer of the blocks. So this is complying with thermal and acoustic regulation very strongly. But we needed an outside layer that would make hempcrete blocks resistant to the rain and funguses, etc., etc. So at that point, this art curator came to our office and said, well, why, I want to make a replica of Alvar Aalto's garden pavilion in my museum. So it was like, it was larger than this room. It was like something really, really big. And we said, well, so let's make it with the material we are studying now, which is charcoal. So we made this Alvar Aalto pavilion with a hemp charcoal mixture. So these were the blocks, charcoal blocks. And this charcoal mixture, that's what we wanted for the 3rd layer. And it has a lot to do with the sugiban, you know, the Japanese technique that you burn the wood, so the wood is more resistant, blah, blah, blah. So that's what we wanted to apply into hempcrete. And the thing is, when we got at the end of the exhibition, there was a phone call like, hey, now we need to demolish and to dump all this charcoal thing. Can you come and take your blocks? And I said, well, that was not part of the contract. We had a contract to set up the art piece, but you know, when artists don't make it explicit that they take it away, then usually the museum does that part of the job. And so they were like, oh God, how can we handle all this, like some 20 tons of material? And by that time I was making another building. It was only the skeleton of the structure was in place. And I thought, well, maybe if I cut the exhibition in parts, I can maybe fit it into the building that was under construction. And that's what we did. Well, first we made a prototype, a 1-to-1 prototype, so we could test it. And the tests were fine. So this was the building I was building at that moment. And so we went and we these are chunks of walls, what you see here. And that was, for me, quite an amazing discovery, because these large walls, like something like this big, we would take them horizontally, like 6 guys or 4 guys, just carrying it, you know, and they would not break. Not even one wall broke. And this was a reversal in my thought, because I never thought a masonry wall would ever be carried horizontally without breaking. So this made for me very clear that with hempcrete you can prefab masonry walls. So you can have a factory that is making the blocks, like the one I've shown to you, Canhamor, and then they can just prefab the walls according to to the sheet from the from the architect's measurements. They can just prefab it and take it and plug it into place because hempcrete is so lightweight, and other things that that makes this possible. So this was quite something, and I was amazed by the charcoal. We found lots of crazy things with charcoal, including the fact that charcoal is the surface of charcoal takes negative or positive ions, and that is something very special. And I was completely charcoalized, charcoalic. When the Venice Biennale exhibition came, and then we made a reinterpretation of a machine that was used during Second World War to make the tanks move in the fields without need for fuel. Actually, this machine was a fuel, and it was wood-based. So this was used by the Russians. They would feed the machine with small chunks of wood, and that would give them plenty of hydrogen. And as a byproduct, you would also get an amazing fertilizer, which is called active charcoal. So we made this replica of a machine with a story of a guy who walked with this machine, and he made a big forest and blah blah blah. But this is like the romantic part of something else which is underway, and which I saw about a year ago. There was is the capacity of we call this black hemp to stop EMF transmissions. So if we made a box of this black hemp and we tested it with an emitter inside the box, and we have a measurer outside the box, and the emissions are messed up, which is really interesting, because then you can imagine you have like a maternity house, or like, you can have a room in your house that is completely EMF free, no pollution from. And something else that we also knew by that time is that you can make batteries out of these walls. So this was told to me by a guy from Canada. I've met him like some 4 years before. He was a crazy guy. I've never seen him ever after. He was in a hemp fair, and he told me we could make batteries out of cement charcoal walls. And in 2023, and that's what I wanted to show to you, but I'm not sure I have this here now. So very recently, MIT just published a research paper where they claim that that you can make super concentrators, which is a fancy name for very large batteries, out of building walls, where charcoal is present in high quantities. And it's not something too far-fetched. I mean, it's perhaps the way the future will show us, because we don't find a way to produce batteries that are not too expensive. And these are huge batteries made with cheap materials like cement or lime or charcoal. So I put my bets on charcoal research, and I hope you enjoyed the presentation. Yeah.
Thank you, Francisco. Slavis, I would like to also invite you here, maybe for a short questions from everybody. Please sit for a while. Thanks a lot for two very interesting presentations. I just perhaps wanted to kind of try maybe and very briefly kind of project maybe in relation to the context that we are here today as an event of part of Department of Interior Design. So I kind of found in both of your work this sort of kind of design being used as some sort of catalyst for a change somehow. You put forward something and you kind of actually both are reclaiming very simple things, you know, like, you know, having a bike in the street, which is a common sense for such a big, you know, for such a long time, you know, but somehow there's no space because all the other spaces, you know, somehow kind of occupied by moving cars and, you know, all the other things. And then there's this legislation that would force you to rent a car park in order for you to install, you know, some of bike parking spaces. And the same kind of through your, you know, trying to reclaim what we already have in a sense of materials that, again, as you say, it's kind of almost impossible to use it, although it's apparently like super green, low energy infrastructure, which we could, you know, kind of much cheaper use it, but actually, you know, legislatively, you know, that's somehow, you know, impossible because of all the kind of paperwork and certification and the amounts of money that needs to be poured in that, which in the end kind of, you know, ends up being this sort of mass-produced products of plastic, kind of easy solutions, which are of course certified because they're, you know, and then we somehow go away. But I kind of see both of you, you know, putting in the world the solutions, you know, through design, through kind of passionate attention to how thing looks, what they bring, and that somehow also becomes part of, you know, imaginary of the future of how it could be. So I think that's kind of just wanted to mention perhaps this in the context of these events which are taking place, especially for students who are coming to study, you know, design and such. That's actually one of the things that design does. It sort of brings the scenarios, brings the solutions, you know, not necessarily when they're asked to do something like to solve some problem, but also as some sort of projection to the kind of solutions that are required, especially today. I mean, we've seen the images of flooding cities and, you know, heat islands and so on, and I think both of your projects respond to that. So I don't know if you want to respond to this, or I also would ask you maybe to very briefly could you talk like very briefly about the workshops that you're doing here in Vilnius and maybe how that relates to your interest in what you do?
I mean, it's quite interesting that you mention it. For me, it's a bit venturing into the unknown, even though it's so simple and it's known. It's maybe a kind of doesn't make sense. But if I look at your work and my work, it's there are simple elements, simple things, and in English they're saying the low-hanging fruit. You know, it's like if you want to transform the way we live and the city works and materials work and the closed-loop integrated systems, it all has been there before. I mean, you know, it's like, but we forgot about it. So we are venturing into the unknown despite everything is known. It's a bit bizarre. And that's one element, and the other is also as an architecture office, very often you tend to draw something up and then you do execution and drawings, and then you do basically the tendering process, and then you almost give it away. Yeah, and then sometimes you go every couple of days or a couple of weeks on site and you test it. So there is always in our profession, with interior design, architecture and so on, this kind of relation with the execution, but it's a bit kind of far off what I can see, and I'm really impressed what you guys are doing, that building it yourself, hands-on, one-to-one samples. We somehow, with our prototyping, we do the same. And in the beginning, I always thought, yeah, you just do a steel structure. We have been doing steel before, and I mean, it's easy, but it's not, you know. And so, therefore, this venturing into the unknown, and then just to close it off with the workshops. I've been always trying in my workshops, not only here in Vilnius, somehow to bring the students to this notion of venturing into the unknown, to be curious about it and to really do things with their own hand. And it's really different whether you have done it or not. For example, today we have been handling these massive stones. We got support by Grinder with a big crane coming, but nevertheless we had to handle them and to see how difficult it is to handle these equipment. And then very often students later on, architects that come on site, you know, how can you do this? Can I move it over there? And why don't you do this? Yeah, it's not so easy. So to get the feeling of material, of the complexity, how they work together, and I think that's the beauty of it. And it's not easy, but we have to get into the process of testing, I think.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. The way I would describe it is that if architects claim the position of builders, because they can do this, architects can build, and we have all the information that is important for building. So we are just this much from building. It's a small gap. I think we can empower our actions a lot, because when the one that conceives a certain building or structure or whatever is the one that builds it, it's very hard to stop this process. And the building sector is full of gates, full of checkpoints, which makes this project kind of sloppy and, you know, very inconvenient and very unfruitful. So if we claim, and that's what I tried to do in this workshop, you know, that students understand that designing and building are parts of our mastery, and we have to feed that. And by feeding this, we might change something in the world a lot easier than just designing and letting others do and build and whatever, because that's when all the troubles come, and we have to be there to fix them. So we better build ourselves. It's, you know, just what Slavis was saying with Slavis words. And we had a song for you. We prepared it. No. Yesterday we had a very nice dinner together.
Yeah, thanks a lot. So, yeah, thanks for bringing that as well. Yeah, the construction processes, which kind of, you know, more and more when you practice, almost, you know, looks like an impossibility, like impossibility in the very kind of way that these professions are policed by legislations and all kinds of regulations and everything. So that's something which I don't know, like there's a lot of courage in kind of bringing this kind of, you know, bringing back again. That's something that, you know, people used to do, design and construct and so on. So
I think we give away responsibility in a way, and also I think we are guided by fear. I mean, in our profession, I feel like everyone is scared. I'm scared myself. You know, it's like constantly, because with, at least in Germany, in other countries quite similar, in Germany very bad, with one foot you're somehow in prison, you know, because of all the kind of everything what goes wrong in the end is your responsibility. And of course you have an insurance, but nevertheless it's a kind of universe of things which can go wrong. So you're guided by fear. And I think somehow through your process as well, I think we have reclaimed almost a sphere of our profession again, where we feel more comfortable and in this kind of universe of regulation and rules which no one understands anymore, you know, to go back to the simplicity again, to make things simple and understandable, and that also the young generation, the students and myself, we do understand how things work. I think that's quite important, and that reclaiming independency again from the industry.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
I'll perhaps, because we had slightly longer time today for two presentations, so I would like to open up as well for questions in the audience, and if anyone would like to ask anything, please raise your hands. Please tell your name when you're asking as well. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Titas. I'm a first year interior design student. I just had a very short question regarding the hem blocks. I saw that you still need to use a certain skeleton, like wood or something. What are the load-bearing qualities of hem blocks? Are they? Is there any possibility for them to be used as load-bearing structure, or it requires subframe or frame and to be held in place? Thank you.
No, no. I mean, there are people who manage, who've been making some. I saw something from the UK, you know, where they. But I've seen this over and over again. You know, I've seen it with straw bale, trying to make straw bale like bearing structure. We've seen it, you know, with rice hulls, with all sorts of stuff. If hempcrete is not meant for bearing structure, and that makes it very interesting. You know why? Because like 98% of the materials in your building are not bearing structure materials. So if you want to have an impact in building construction, you rather focus in the non-bearing materials than in the bearing materials. So that's why I have a kind of a preference for this family of materials.
Hi, I'm Brecht. I was very much triggered by the image of the trees. There was this kind of little metal thing around it. I was curious what it was, but I was more curious how it works that you can reserve trees at a person that grows trees for building industry, for a building that you are not yet designing and that is in the future. How does that work?
That works with this kind of trees. These are Acacia australis. It's an invasive tree, which people, you know, they have a hard time to control the trees, but they are really nice for building construction, especially if they're matured. So when the tree trunk reaches a certain point that is like really nice fine wood. So what we did, we went to people who were, you know, planning to chop the trees off. And we said, well, let's keep them. And when the steel plate reaches a certain level, that's kind of a measurement. People would call us.
They're ready.
Yeah, it's like they're ready. And so it works this way. And you can offer, you know, your clients to pay for new trees, like autochthon trees, which people do because it's very cheap. So it's kind of a cycle that works. I mean, it could be expanded in different ways, but it works.
Nice alternative business model for tree, a nice alternative business model for tree growth and tree production or wood production. Yeah.
Hello, my name's Amy. I'm formulating the question while I'm sitting here, but first of all, thank you for your presentations and also I think the scale in which you're working is interesting in a way. Yours is very personal with these personal homes or personal requests, and then yours is more on a urban scale. A question I have is, what we're asking for are really cultural shifts, and in a way I'm wondering where the social kind of social responsibility connects to these projects. Like, for example, with the bikes, is there a program where to get these bike kiosks, do people have to come together to ask for them so that there's already sort of a social community around these kiosks? I'm just wondering where the social transformation is happening and where this knowledge or the ability to make these solutions are not just in your hands, but in others.
I think in the end is also a behavioral change. I think the transformation is to change things the way we did them before and to change. And one thing I would like also, and I come back to that topic once more to talk, because we are also here in the interior design department, in terms of, I've been doing buildings and urban structures, large scale buildings, but in this case it's almost a smallish structure for us, for an architect, you know, but I found this rather interesting because no one is really taking care of such a scale. If you think about, let's say, public toilet, for instance, you know, like, I mean, who's really designing them? We have now very new ones in Berlin. They're super ugly, and I thought no one with a sense of design has actually worked on those, and they are now scattered throughout the city, everywhere, you know. So on this kind of smaller scale, even public furniture, there are some companies now, there are companies who are actually doing more beautiful stuff, but this is even smaller furniture. So there's a scale, I would say, where no one is really taking care of in terms of infrastructure. Infrastructure has to function, and then it's okay, you know. And I think architects don't really look into such a scale. So I think that also is a product designer, it's too big for them. So it's a scale where I think interior design is an interesting profession who look at more smaller scale, more focused, more zoomed in, and not in these large structures. That's one element I want to mention. And also in terms of how things function, we had a lot of discussions about our biking box and how people can access it, and the long term. And I have to say, everything what we have been doing has been self-funded. You know, we are not this kind of venture capital, seed funding, startup, and so therefore we have come to a point where now, I mean, we need to sell in order to keep going. Otherwise, there's no future. You know, and it's also a model where it's very difficult maybe to get external funding and startup funding, because everyone is in giving money into digital infrastructures, you know, but we are it's hardware. But so the question is, how does it work? It's actually, ideally it should be software, which is an open software. You can just book it like you do, for example, your scooter. But that would also mean we need to develop a large software, which is quite, or even we plug into an existing one, which is quite expensive. But coming back to your social function, in the UK, it works in that way that the one company is doing something similar, but it's analog, not digital, and they do it for the municipality. So they manage the entire process, but it is owned by the municipality. And I can apply, for example, if I would like to have the box in front of my house, I can apply, and if they have, let's say, at least 2 or 3 people, like a minimum amount per box in the street, you would get the box in front of your house. So, I mean, social function, I don't know, but it's kind of, it's also the question, how does it work? How do you make it accessible to people? It's a low threshold accessibility of infrastructure.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay.
Thank you very much for your presentations. It was very interesting, very nice. And coming back to the topic of those charcoal blocks, maybe I missed it, but I wanted to ask about like waterproof qualities of the material, because to me it seems like it's something that it would absorb moisture and probably keep it, and how, even if it's compressed, I imagine it is not compressed to the point that it's like, but maybe it is, I'm not sure. Just maybe if you could give a comment about waterproofing. Thanks.
It's not waterproof. It's not. The question, you know, hemp is, the part of hemp we use is the wood, is the inside of the plant. So we're talking about wood, though it has a lot more silica than normally. Hemp is just wood. And so the question of waterproofing wood is very tricky, because what you want with wood is that it doesn't rot. That's the main thing, because wood can handle water pretty well, okay? And so for wood not to rot, you must not have constant water in the wood, number one. Number two, you need to make it unpleasant for funguses and insects. And this unpleasant part is what you can work the most by adding charcoal or other things like borax, or you can make it very unpleasant for funguses and insects. So like half of the problem is gone. That's how far you can go with it without adding waterproofing binders, which is an easy way to go. Like if you add resins or sorts of cements, you could make it waterproof, yes. But the way I work, it's not.
Thank you. Thank you, Slavis and Francisco. I think it's a good time to close it. Thanks for very interesting conversations and presentations today. So I just want to announce a couple of things related to this busy week of workshops. So they are concluding tomorrow and on Friday. So everyone is welcome to come and also bring friends to the presentations of the results. So tomorrow from 7 p.m., 7 in the evening, there's going to be the presentation of Francisco's work, reclaiming textiles in Vilnius Botanical Garden in Vingio Parkas. So don't go to Kairėnai, please come to Vingio Parkas. I understand that it's also kind of jointly presented with another workshop taking place there with Martinas also involved and Architecturos Fondas as well. So tomorrow from 7 p.m. These projects will be presented. Then on Friday from 3 to 5 in the afternoon, there's going to be a presentation space between of a workshop run by Slavis. It's going to take place in Naujoji Vilnia in the public park. I have like a long link here with the place exactly where it is, but yes. Well, yes, it's in a park in Naujoji Vilnia. It's called Gerovės Parkas. So please come there. And then on the evening of Friday from 6 o'clock, everyone is invited to come here to this space. So from 6 to 8 o'clock, there's going to be a presentation of TAT workshop, which is taking place in Hazelnut Island. It's perhaps too much to ask to come to Hazel Island for showing the work, so it's going to be, let's say, presented remotely, and from 6 to 8, and then from 8 onwards, it's a kind of general presentation of these 2 busy weeks, followed up by all kinds of conversations and other things. So that's going to take place basically here and then outside in the courtyard. So everyone is welcome, and please bring friends, and thanks for coming. Thank you, Slavis. Thank Francisco.